Okay, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to come and moderate this session. It is a great honor to do so. And the topic for this particular session is harmony in infrastructure and building in infrastructure. From my experience, harmony is something we all strive to achieve in a particular construction products, but don't always manage to achieve it. But from this, we can actually learn and try and find suitable solutions to issues that we've had to come during previous projects. So the purpose of this discussion today is to see how we can take forward the quality agenda by using continual improvement. And this is all part of the Abu Dhabi vision for 2030. And QCC has been asked by the Executive Council to review the standards and processes which underpin the development of infrastructure projects within Abu Dhabi. And today we're going to ask a number of guests to come along and give their impressions and understandings of particular projects that they've been involved with, where they have learnt significant experiences and things that they can take forward in making things improve and get better in the process of construction. So my plan is each speaker will either deliver a presentation or give a discussion for about 4, 5, 6 minutes. After each presentation, I will summarize it and ask some specific questions of the individuals, and then I will throw it open to the floor. I'm hoping, time permitting, we'll have something like 10 minutes or so of discussion that we can have from the floor, so we can have a full and frank discussion on these various issues. But to start with, I'm going to ask John Lesniewski, the Director of Sales and Commercial Agreements for Etihad Rail, to give us a quick presentation on this large infrastructure project to set the scene for us. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Etihad Rail, as you know, is one of the most prominent development projects in the UAE right at the moment, and actually we are interfacing with not just the UAE, but also with the GCC. We know we have to interface with ports, with urban planning, land acquisition, all the infrastructures. We are probably going to be one of the most prominent enablers of economic development and social integration in the UAE in the future. Next slide. Next slide, please. We're not too integrated yet. They were supposed to give me a remote to advance. There it is, okay. So the railroad was actually founded as a company in 2009 by a national law, but we started planning in approximately 2006. We have done a tremendous amount of planning for the railroad. Pictured in this slide here is two of our locomotives pulling a train of, thank you very much. Pulling a train of wagons that I'll talk about just in a little bit. The railroad has an underlying network connecting to all the major freight generators in the country, and also to all the major urban areas, and also to some of the lesser urban areas, because we are an integrator of the social network. We have built this railroad in 3 stages so we could properly manage the development in a timely manner. Stage 1 is in yellow here. And this is basically the stage that is used to transport sulfur from Shah and Habshan, which are towards the bottom of this map, and they are being transported to Ruwais, which is at the port at the top of the map there. Stage 2 was broken into several different packages. Package A, B, C, D and E are for systems and PMC, and package F goes into Musafa. This is important because this connects the ports with Guayfat, which is the gateway into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and onto the GCC. We envision a lot of containerized traffic in the future, so that is one of the reasons why this is stage 2, so we can start moving containers as soon as possible. It also goes down to El Ain, where we will connect with Oman Rail to service the line going down to Sohar and Muscat, and we connect at Guayfat to SRO, Saudi Rail Organization, and they will be taking containers to Dammam, Riyadh, and connecting all the way up to Kuwait. Stage 1 is partially operational already. We are doing testing and commissioning as we speak, and we will be fully operational with Shah by the end of the year, so that's our target. Stage 2 will be operational by end of 2017, 2018. And stage 3 connects us to the quarry and cement factories in the northern Emirates, and that we will be able to bring down those products in by train instead of by truck. You know, we envision that we will eliminate these big heavy trucks from the highway and make for less congestion, less pollution, more safety. So here's some key facts about the railroad. It's basically 1,200 kilometers in length, mostly double track, so trains can go in both directions. We have about 300 structures, 10 tunnels. Freight will travel at 120 kilometers maximum, passenger at 200. It's designed to a variety of international standards. We're integrated with the other GCC countries. We all have the same standards, and so that our trains will be able to pass from one country to the next with either changing just the locomotive or changing the crew and keeping the locomotive attached. So it's a uniform system in all the GCC countries, which is a tremendous accomplishment. This is our footprint within the UAE. It's in green. But we are also part of what's called the GCC mainline, which goes from Muscat all the way up to Kuwait City. It connects to Doha. There will be a new causeway built to Bahrain, and it connects to Dhahran. But there's also additional parts to the GCC railroad, particularly Saudi Rail has an existing line that goes from Dammam to Riyadh. This was built in 1956, has been operational for all these years. It is being upgraded right now. It carries passenger and freight. It was built originally by Bechtel so it can move oil field equipment to Hufuf and into Riyadh. Recently, Saudi opened what they call their north-south line, which is in gold here, and this is for carrying iron ore and phosphates to Jubail, and it also connects, as you can see, to Riyadh so that they can bring passenger service to these hinterlands. There's another line that goes from Jeddah to Riyadh and on to Dammam. So this will provide for cross-peninsula transportation of containers between the two ports and integrate the east and the west. And there's also then the high-speed line, which connects Mecca and Medina. And this line is actually starting construction. It's been tendered. The tenders have been awarded. It's ready to start construction there in the stage right now of acquiring the land from the owners. And the green line is also in design development, right? As we speak, it'll be tendered shortly. So just coming back, when you talk about how do we integrate ourselves, best practices, we have spent a tremendous amount of time with ADNOC in the last 4 or 5 years. And this is a schematic of how we will integrate. If you look at the bottom and you see the factories are in the lower right-hand corner, those are the sulfur granulating factories that they have built. They built 2, they're brand new, they're just being commissioned now. They will send granulated product to the trains. We will load the trains. They will be taken from either Habshan or Shah. They will go to Royas, and there the contents, the sulfur granules, will be loaded out of the bottom of the hopper wagons into a pit, and then through a series of conveyor belts, it goes to a storage area, and from that storage area, it eventually gets loaded into the vessels that go to Asia, China, India are the basic outlets for this product. It's used for fertilizer, mostly. So we have had tremendous amount of integrated planning. And so when you talk about best practices and quality integration, we've been doing this with ADNOC for the past 5-6 years. We are also a social enabler. There are economic and social benefits from a railroad. And some good examples are here. The Trans-Siberian Railroad has really been integrating society in that portion of the world for the last 95 years. and also in the UK, and not just the UK, but other countries where they found they had abandoned or old rail lines. They've been upgrading them, and it's been bringing passenger traffic onto the rail to these communities and making the communities more vibrant. As you see also in the next upper right-hand quadrant there, that rail transportation that produces the lowest carbon impact, so this is another one of our contributions to the economy and to the environment here. We are the lowest compared to light truck and heavy truck. We are also the safest as far as transportation of passengers, and as you see in the lower right-hand corner, there's a tremendous amount of road accidents and fatalities, and we should be able, by removing a lot of these trucks, we're planning on removing approximately 8,000 plus trucks from the highway a year by switching to rail. So that will reduce the amount of congestion on the highways and improve safety and improve fluidity, which will help benefit the economy overall. We also have done a lot of studies on wildlife protection. When we built out in the Benuna area, and we actually had Hyder go out there and some other consultants, and they went and they collected, they identified where all the animal life was and the plant life. If there were select trees, they moved them. If there were animals in the area, they actually went out with white gloves and they picked up all the lizards and they carried them, they transported them to areas where we weren't operating so they could be safe and we weren't damaging them. We've done the same thing for the Hubara. We've identified where they are and purposely did not work in those areas. We've had sand mitigation. I'm asked continually, almost every time I give a presentation, what are we doing about sand? It is a problem. What we've done is we didn't operate. Again, we used best practices. We went around the world and we joined with University of Birmingham, and they did a study for us, and we talked with people in Asia and Africa about how they mitigated the sand problem. And there's several ways of doing that. One is you can put down this fabric, this twine fabric, which stabilizes the sand from blowing. It also then attracts vegetation to grow in it because it's more of a stable environment. We're also putting berms on either side of our tracks. And what this does is causes the wind to lift the sand up and go over the tracks. And as the wind goes up, it takes more energy to go up, so it has less energy to carry the sand. So the sand drops out of the air before it gets to the tracks. And so we're actually keeping the sand from encroaching on the tracks. And we know there will be areas where there will be sand problems, and we have special machinery that has brushes on it. It sweeps the sand up and it blows it off to the side. So we know there will be continual maintenance for sand. So in summary, this is our railroad. It's modern, it's safe, it's efficient. It adds value to the communities. It adds value to the environment. It adds value to economic development for the country. We've incorporated the best international practices, whether technical for the actual track and train and systems, and also commercial. We're working internationally with commercial organizations how to produce the best commercial environment for the GCC. And it's a new industry. I keep telling everybody my main job is basically going out and educating this community, the country, on how railroads will impact the environment and how it will be an enabler of economic development for everybody. So that's my speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. That was quite interesting. There's a number of topics I'd like to come back to, particularly as this is such an innovation for this part of the world and quite a novel, new example of infrastructure being used. I'd like to ask Abdullah Ahmed to give us some thoughts that he has on the role of the Urban Planning Council on taking on the real challenge of building harmony into the construction process, which is challenging at the best of times, but perhaps with some thoughts of examples of where they've had some successes and how they could perhaps build on those successes in speeding through the process.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. I think, as we all know, the Abu Dhabi Emirate Planning Council is the responsible agency to do the physical planning of Abu Dhabi Emirate. When we talk here about Abu Dhabi Emirate, we almost talk about 86% of the total area of the UAE. As a regulatory body within Abu Dhabi government, the Urban Planning Council is a regulatory authority which is mandated to issue manuals and standards and regulations on different disciplines. So specifically today we're talking about the infrastructure, and when we mean by infrastructure we talk about things under the ground as well as things above the ground, such as roads and highways. One of the main successes the Urban Planning Council undertook since the creation of the council is putting together the utility corridor design manual. We work closely with the stakeholders in Abu Dhabi government, such as utility providers from the utility side, as well as the infrastructure and transportation agencies like Ittihad Rail, the Department of Transport, etc. So the utility corridor design manual is basically a manual which give a guidance to the developers for the private and the government sectors alike on how the corridors and where and what are the dimensions of these corridors need to be undertook. So it's a manual. It's an adopted and approved manual. We do have some successful stories by implementing this manual into mega developments. Today, the Urban Planning Council is responsible of reviewing mega developments. We talk here about almost a cities which contains 60 and 100,000 people. We have Masdar, we have, in different disciplines, of course. Masdar city, we talk about industrial developments like Sheikh Khalifa ports, as well as developments with mega developers like Addar, for example, Raha Beach and Yas Island. So if you notice from my examples, I mentioned like different disciplines. There is leisure, work, industrial, as well as some infrastructure. But the common factor of all these projects is infrastructure. We need infrastructure for these projects. So it's something we don't compromise and we don't compromise with, and we highlight it as one of the priorities. On the other hand, we, as an Urban Planning Council with the government agencies, hand-to-hand established the Urban Street Design Manual. This is a manual which basically identifies the roads hierarchy with the dimensions. It tells you basically how the roads need to be designed and where it needs to be designed. On the other hand, it's highlighting the streets furnitures. I'll give an example of that. There's a tool identified by the council which basically allows the developers or anyone who logs into the UPC website to design a road, how this road need to be looks like, what are the dimensions of the lanes. There are some measures being undertaken like pedestrian and cycling lanes. And what's good about the two manuals, the two manuals I mentioned, which is the Utility Corridor Design Manual as well as the Urban Street Design Manual, is this tool is allow the developers to basically design a full street above the ground and under the ground. So it allows you to create a cross-section on what are these utilities, what are the basically utilities you're allowed to have in one trunk, as well as what are the dimensions and the lanes need to be above the ground for mobility and for use. On the other hand, above all, as I mentioned, the UPC is responsible of reviewing mega developments. So part of the review we are undertaking is asking and seeking from the developers some requirements in terms of the infrastructure. We are doing a supply and demand review, of course, in a close coordination with our stakeholders, utility providers. So the developer, before he's being granted his approval, he has to submit some certain requirements. And part of these requirements is basically the supply versus the demand in order for us as a government with the stakeholders to understand, is the existing infrastructure sufficient enough to hold such developments? The other things, of course, allowing the uses and the gross floor areas. This requires another transportation studies, which we are working on closely with the Department of Transport through the Transportation Department within the Urban Planning Council. So these are the major areas which, as a UPC, we are moving ahead with. Of course, having such clear requirements creates a sort of a transparency for the developers. Developers now they should have a clear guidance on what they need to look at and what they have to basically undertake before they are approaching the government in order to get a planning approval and the construction permits approval. The other thing is creates a sort of a consistency with between the existing standards. Now, As far as I know, the Urban Planning Council and the government agencies is working closely with the Quality and Conformity Council, is basically putting together a full manual on the specifications and the standards of the infrastructure. So this will create a sort of a consistency as well as a transparency. Above all, basically avoiding any overlap between the government agencies. So that's another goal as well, which we are moving forward with.
So your manuals are readily available to give the guidance to the developer and the contractor of their requirements?
Absolutely. The UPC website actually includes all the complete sustainable community manuals. We're talking here about not only infrastructure manuals, but we're talking about different, lots of manuals. We're talking about the public realm design manual, the urban street design manual, the utility corridor design manual. Most of the manuals adopted and approved by the government is available at the UPC website. Add to all that, Kevin, is that before any developer approaches the UPC in order to get a planning approval, we sit down with them at the inquiry stage. At this inquiry stage, we're basically showing an examples and successful stories on previous development being approved and what are the lessons learned from the previous developments. We're sharing all this knowledge with the developer in order to achieve the highest expected goals.
And you mentioned right at the very end the work you've been doing with the Quality Conformity Council and putting forward a manual which will give an overview of the processes and procedures in the infrastructure processes, which we will look forward to seeing in the next few weeks or months, hopefully. So thank you for that, Abdullah.
Thank you.
Moving on then, Mohammed Mirza, the Senior Manager for Aldar on infrastructure. And he's going to give us some thoughts on how standards and planning can start to work into sustainability and some of the issues around sustainability being novel types of products and the challenges that brings.
Thank you very much, Kevin. As a matter of fact, what Mr. Abdullah said about the UPC, how UPC has developed all that material, the manuals, has helped a lot the master developers within the city, within Abu Dhabi, to basically develop the city and all the master development. Now, if I go back a few years when we didn't have all those manuals, I mean, we used to go back and design and then go back to UPC and RSB and other utility companies and seek their approvals. Now, at least we have stepped forward and then we have got all the manuals. Most of the manuals are available, which we can design and design a city for 50,000, 100,000 people based on the manuals and have a successful city, sustainable city. Now, back in Aldar, we have developed some iconic development within Abu Dhabi, and Ferrari World, Yas Water World, and all these. And these would not have been possible without the government initiatives and without the help of the government at different stages through different regulations and all that. Now, if I go back a few years back when we did not have all those manuals and all the guidelines for designing, for each development, we had to go back and design and then go and meet different agencies to get the approvals. At least now we have to move forward with the standardization and with the manuals, so we can still not shop under one. It's not still as a one-stop shop, but hopefully one day, as Abdullah said, we will reach a stage where we can go to QCC and being a one-stop shop for all our requirement as a master developers for the city and being the building or the infrastructure. Now, we in Aldar, we have experimented and we have done sustainable designs. For example, in Al Raha Beach, in our Manira, we have got solar water heaters. The whole building, the whole development is supplied water heater with the solar from the solar source with the backup as a natural gas, which has been very successful. And most of the time during the year, we get basically all the water heater for the whole development. It comes through the solar. The few foggy days which we have, the backup is a natural gas, which is again very an energy which is environmental friendly. Similarly, we are experimenting on the LED lights and lowering the requirement on the energy and the water consumption. And so these are the areas where basically we in Aldar we are working to have more sustainable developments. And wherever possible, we also do use district cooling, depending on the density of the development. And if it's a vertical buildings, we basically use the central cooling system where we can have a diversity factor and we can reduce the energy and therefore the carbon footprints. Similarly, for the water consumption, we have been successful in using our TSC for our irrigation purposes and also for the district cooling as a DC makeup water. So these are a few experiences where we have done. In future, we are planning to use also the condensation water produced out of the building's air conditioning system and the air handling units to use it for our irrigation, for the irrigation purposes, and which basically is water. We believe that the water is a very precious commodity, especially in this part of the world. So we are trying to utilize the wastewater or the condensate water, whatever water resources we have, to reuse it and make it possible to basically to be sustainable as far as the water and power is concerned.
Thank you. So now we move on to Alan Thompson, who's the Managing Director of the Abu Dhabi Sewage Service Company, and he's going to give us some thoughts on challenges that he's come across in the last couple of years and how these challenges have moved into sort of opportunities and how he's gained and learned from these experiences.
Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for Abu Dhabi Quality Foundation and QCC for arranging the forum. In Abu Dhabi Sewage Services Company, we don't have a standard product. You know, we get what comes to us, whether that's from residential, commercial, or industrial units, and we have to deal with it. So we do standardize. We look at what we have to produce at the end of our process rather than what we're doing at the beginning. But perhaps I can elaborate a bit on that. If we look at how we manage the system going forward in a practical sense, our STEP program, which is probably one of the better known pieces of work that we're doing in the Abu Dhabi area, is a STEP. STEP stands for Strategic Tunnel Enhancement Program. It's a 42-kilometer long gravity sewer tunnel, 100 meters deep at its deepest and 5.5 meters diameter, designed for an 80-year life. Now, nothing like this has been done in the area previously, and when we set out to build it, we made some key decisions which I believe helped us get the standard that we were looking for, and without compromise on price. What we did was we set up a governance system for the program. And by that I mean we persuaded our leaders at the time that delegated decision-making would be essential for us to move this forward. We managed to persuade our leaders that this was the case, that we would be able to manage all the decision-making on the technical side. We had expert program managers appointed who had dealt with tunneling and had that background and experience that we did not have. On the financial delegated authority, we would refer certain financial decisions up to the top level. At this time, we were part of ADWIA. And with that agreement going forward, we managed to get some very fast decisions made and put the program into action extremely quickly. So we had agreed delegation and an agreed program whereby we could move forward without further delay, to the point that after we appointed our program managers in 2008, we had the first award of contract in 2009. And that is a major achievement because this is a very big contract, over 1 billion dirhams for that initial contract. There are 6 contracts making up part of STEP. Other fundamental decisions, we went for international contractors because of the expertise that was required. We set pre-qualification standards which were very high and required the right experience for the contractors to pre-qualify. We went for international standards. We used a modified FIDIC standard, which is the Consulting Engineer Standard, International Consulting Engineer Standard, with some modifications, which has been used in Abu Dhabi before. We took on board, as part of these modifications, risk of unforeseen physical conditions. One of the biggest problems in tunneling is coming across cavities, and we know that in certain parts of Abu Dhabi Emirate, there have been problems with collapses of roads and buildings because of cavities underground. So although we did geological testing and exploration before, we understood as best we could what the risks were, and we said that as the client, we would take on the unforeseen physical condition risk. Now that has paid off big time. One, it allows the contractor to price knowing what the risks are or what the risks are not from his point of view. Two, it allowed him to put in a very competitive price on that basis, knowing that if he came across anything unforeseen, the client would bear the cost. That has worked out very favorably for us. We've had very good geological conditions. We have some UPC, unforeseen physical conditions, in small areas, and we've worked closely with the contractor to come up with the best overall solution, both from a technical and a price point of view. We've also taken on an owner-controlled insurance policy, so we effectively insured the works as a client, rather than have 6 contractors with their own, or potentially 6 contractors. As it worked out, we have 4 contractors with potentially their own insurance policy. So there were economies of scale to be had by OCIP, and again, a standardization. If I can perhaps, change tack slightly, just to look forward about future harmonization, I see generally favorable reasons to go forward on harmonization, but I think there are some pitfalls that have to be avoided. Firstly, I don't think you should go for the lowest common denominator. I think the standard has to be a good one. Equally, it has to allow for flexibility and innovation. There's a danger if you're too tight with your standards, then you strangle the ability to bring in new ideas and develop forward in the industry that you're working in. So there's a definite danger of stagnation. There's also a danger that the supply chain dries up because people or companies who are not providing the standard that you're looking for, or you've excluded them, will go elsewhere, and you'll end up with monopoly situations. There's a danger of a monopoly developing when you go into a standard format. It also brings in barriers to entry for other innovators and new suppliers coming into the industry. A good example is our boot contracts, where we specify what our performance requirements are, but we allow the bidders to use their own, within reason, to use their own specialist systems to deliver that performance. By doing that, you're getting good price and you're getting good expertise coming in. I know time's running out, so
Thank you.
Kevin, I'll just stop there. And
Yes, that was fascinating. What these presentations give is the size of these projects. And we've got our last presentation, so hopefully we'll see a PowerPoint presentation appear on the screen very shortly. And Engineer Ibrahim El-Noor is going to give us a presentation on some experience of, again, building a very large project, this time a housing project, and the quantities and numbers involved are really, again, quite immense. So over to you, Ibrahim.
I thank you for inviting Sanada to express
Can we hear?
experience we've had.
Ibrahim,
The largest,
you need...
one of the largest infrastructure projects in Abu Dhabi, probably in the United Arab Emirates. We are going to talk about lessons
There isn't, is
from
It's on?
It's not.
That's it now. You're okay.
It's okay. The lesson learned from South Shamkha project and how we can use the lesson for the next largest infrastructure, which is the Northwest project. The challenges we face under the South Shamkha project with the NOCs, how to handle the authorities requirement during the construction stage, and sometimes they are changed to suit, and also the assets, how to hand over the assets for a project such as South Shamkha, which, to give you an idea about the size of the project, is half the size of Abu Dhabi Island. We're building a full infrastructure for 130,000 people, 12,500 villas. So it's a huge project and a huge challenge for us and for the authority to take over, maintain, and operate. To find the problem, we had to identify the problem during the construction stage and then analyze it and then decide how to go forward. We define certain elements. We're not going to talk about everything we learned, but we're going to talk about certain elements, like, for example, the delivery strategy, how we deliver the project. We should, for example, agree a housing strategy, which is going to affect the phasing of the project, and this is as the employer. And then after that, we, as a designer, he has to ensure that the phasing of the project is in line with the strategy of the housing strategy, the occupancy rate in the future. How long will it take? Is it 1 year to complete, to have people living there? 5 years, 10 years, probably 15 years. And this is in the case of South Shamkha. It's going to take a long time to reach the design occupancy rate. We come to the phasing of the project as the beginning. We believe that the master plan should reflect that the project is not going to be built in a year. I mean, when I'm talking about the project, I'm talking about the housing, the residency. It's not going to be built in a year or 5 years. It could be 10 years. So the actual master plan should reflect that to allow the construction and the infrastructure without being hindered by other factors, such as, for example, the layout of the master plan. We faced that on the South Shamkha, caused a lot of encroachment with the utilities, and we had to modify part of the surface corridor to suit. That takes some time, and that we've done that on the site while the contractors actually working on site. Then we come to the phasing of the project. The consultant, unfortunately, we have 4 phases, phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're building the network for the sewerage and the water for phase 1 and phase 2, while the reservoirs for the water is in phase 4 and the sewerage pumping station in phase 3. I will not be able to commission I will not be able to use the system until I finish the whole project. And that was not the intention of the project. The intention was to allow the plot owner to start the construction while we are actually on site. So the phasing was an issue. We try now to minimize that in the North Wespa project by ensuring that the phasing of the project, each phase is an independent, can be completed, commissioned, and used without waiting for the next phase. We come to the shareholders and how we can handle the coordination between each party. We found that we, at the employer, we tender the project, we have contractors on site, but we actually don't have the full authority on running the project, because at the end of the day, the authorities are involved with us on how to handle the project, approval of material, method of construction, all this has to be handled by the authority. So the lesson we learn is we should have a committee formed by all authorities in order to resolve all the issues and unify the system and how to resolve the issue caused in the construction on the site. For example, we found that the design, our supervisory consultant is supervising the work, while also the authority have their own consultant supervising the work. So we got to find the platform between the two in order to minimize the time for approval and construction. This is one of the lessons learned in the South Shamkha. Then we come to the very important is the strategy. How are we going to the occupancy rate on this project is such a large project, which it may take 10 to 15 years to be fully occupied. We found that at the design stage, our consultant or the design consultant design everything, and we got the approval from all authorities. We have, for example, when we come to the road network, we have 52 signalized junctions. Then we start construction on site, and then we find, well, you cannot put signals here because you don't have people. You got to build a roundabout. And we had to do that on site. It's better if we can do it at the design stage and agree to all the authorities, do your TMB, the traffic management plan, agree the arrangement over the housing strategy, how many years, how many people in each stage. By doing that, we will be able to minimize the contractual claims and time of construction. In the meantime, we at the design stage, we should have carried out a value engineering exercise. Unfortunately, we've done that on the South Shamkha project during the construction stage. We were able to do the value engineering without impacting on the contractor's activity. And we luckily that we've done it, we save money, we save time without impacting contractually on the contractors. However, it is strongly advised that you must do it at the design, at the concept and the prelim stage. Then we come to the construction and handing over. We finished phase 1 and phase 2 in South Shamkha. We allowed some of the residents to start the construction of the villas. At the moment, we are in the process of handing over the assets. I'm having a third party on site using my assets, which still belong to the contractor. This is going to cause a problem between us and the contractor unless we expedite the handing over to the authority. We should have considered that also at the design stage and the tendering stage by allowing a certain time, say for example a year, which our contractor or the construction contractor, the infrastructure contractor, can carry out the operation and maintenance for a year until we sort out all the handing over process. Finally, we have the contract. Our contract's based on FIDIC. But as an employer, the engineer have no full authorities to make decision for us. We are the government, we as the employer make decision on certain element, variations, money-wise, extension. So again, there are some gaps in the contracts we have, it need to be filled in order to find the bridge fully between the FIDIC and our requirement. Thirdly, the other issue as well is the method of measurement used in the contract is different from the method of measurement Abu Dhabi usually used. For example, the project is based on SESM. I'm not getting into technical, but I'm just highlighting certain issue. We're using SESM for method of measurement, which is fine. It's based on a UK system, it's fine. But when you try to implement SESM on the authorities, I have water, power, sewerage, and road. Each authority have their own specification or requirement or standard, and sometimes, and I'm using one unified method of measurement, I found a gap between, to comply with each authority with their own requirement, there is always a gap where can create contractual issue with the contractors. This also got to be looked into it. I mean, for example, they can put a particular condition for the SESM or use the system which we've been using in Abu Dhabi for years. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Very swift end there. Thank you, Engineer Ibrahim. We're getting very close to lunchtime, but a few points to think about, and I will see if there's some questions that we can take. But what strikes me more than anything is we are already delivering some huge projects. I mean, Engineer Ibrahim was talking about a housing estate for 130,000 people. That's a city in many countries. We're talking about sewage pipes of 5-meter diameters. 5.5. 5.5, that's huge. And well, an Etihad rail is just something enormous throughout the whole of the region. So with that in mind, are there any particular questions that people would like to take forward and think about improvements? And bear in mind, we are already delivering some huge projects. No, it looks like the thought of their lunch is obviously more important than questions at the moment. But I think that could also be a reflection of the very fine presentations that we had from the speakers, which covered a range of subjects, which I found personally very interesting and fascinating when you think of the size of these projects, and they are being delivered reasonably successfully already. Who knows what we can achieve with the improvement in the systems that are being planned. Thank you very much.
I think there's a couple of questions.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the information. It's been a great presentation so far. My question is for the gentleman from Musandada. I was curious, I thought that your lessons learned list was very thorough and wanted to see what other opportunities you had to share that lessons learned so other people who are developing major infrastructure projects can also avoid any of these potential pitfalls. Thank you.
Well, we are actually sharing the lesson learned with the authority concerned. We're having regular meeting. We are part of the steering committee for the infrastructure, and we always express our view and our experience with the concerned team, and it's all been taken care of at the moment. One thing is, Alan mentioned, for example, which I think it is a very, I didn't really stress it here, is opening the door for other suppliers, for new ideas, for companies. I mean, we were sometimes we were forced to use certain list or certain. No, open the door. Yeah, it may take longer to approve a newcomer, but once you approve it, you create a better competition. You bring new ideas, and all these things being shared with the steering committee, the infrastructure steering committee.
Was there another speaker at the back of the hall? No. Okay then, gentlemen, thank you very much for your presentations, and thank you very much for listening to us.